Story 1. Johnny Carson at my grandma's house in Kansas. I can still see her on the sofa laughing. It makes me happy. Story 2. Andy Griffith. My father has watched it my entire life. 40 years later, he still has it on sometimes when I visit his house. Story 3. Hee Haw. I was very young and my father used to watch it. I also remember watching Star Trek, the original series, a lot. I loved Mr. Spock. Story 4. I don't think anyone would remember this show, but the first I ever watched was Adventures of the Gummy Bears. Story 5. Probably The Gong Show. My father loved it. I think that, and my mother reading me David Barry Collins' account for about 75% of my personality. Story 6. Not the first. I can't remember. Probably all my children because of my mom, but I remember the first time I saw an episode of Columbo. My mom thought I would like it. I told her it was dumb that they showed who the killer was at the very beginning, so what could the rest of the hour be about? My mom said, "But wait until you see how he figures it out." She was right, and I was hooked. Story 7. I remember staying up late at night with my grandparents when I was a small child and watching Bob Newhart. Story 8. Creature Feature. The Twilight Zone. There was also a really cool show about cave people and dinosaurs, but I cannot remember what it was called. Story 9. The Honeymooners. Yes, I am that old. Terrified me. Jackie Gleason yelling in his wife's face and threatening her with his fist. One of these days. To the moon, Alice. To this day, it bothers me a lot. My father thought it was hilarious. It was not. Story 10. The first television show I really remember watching and being invested in the overarching plot was the X-Men cartoon series from the 1990s. Story 11. Amigos. Aunque no fue porque yo quisiera verlo, siendo el menor de 5 hermanos, mi turno para ver la televisión nunca llegaba. Entonces, me acostumbré a ver con ellos lo que veían. Story 12. Raised in the 1970s, so probably a soap opera. I am old and can still hum the theme song to Days of Our Lives. Story 13. King Leonardo, the king of Bongo Congo, and his advisor O.D. Cologne. Saturday morning cartoons at the grandparents' house before we had television at home. Also, Popeye cartoons hosted by Dwayne Elliott and Floppy on Saturday and Sunday mornings. First non-cartoon show, Sky King. Story 14. Wow, am I really old? Ma and Pa Kettle. The Big Circus. I remember when they brought our first television in. Took 2 men to carry it in. It was a 9-inch television screen. It's kind of funny now when you think about it. It had doors, so I had to open them before you could watch television. It was so new that our little dog, when he watched Ed Sullivan with Animal Acts, would go behind the television when the dogs were on stage. Now, isn't that cute? It was black and white. Story 15. Play School Australia and Sesame Street. There were no other children's shows on television in my regional area in the late 1970s when my memories begin. Story 16. Power Rangers. I was called Power Punk in grade school because I loved it so much. Only as an adult do I realize they were making fun of me. I used to say all the time that I would meet Jason David Frank. Everyone rolled their eyes and laughed. Joke's on them. I have 3 signed photos hanging up. Story 17. Probably Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I can name a few shows I remember watching as a kid, but I do not know which was first. Story 18. I remember watching Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind on some television program. Came out in 1984. I would have been 6 years old. That seems about right for my memory. I felt so bad for the baby Omu. Story 19. I used to watch Quincy Medical Examiner with my grandmother. It made me want to be a medical examiner until I realized I needed to become a doctor. I just wanted to solve crimes and investigate deaths. Story 20. Cheers. I'm assuming my mother was watching it on Nickelodeon at night. I grew up thinking I loved Cheers, but then eventually realized I don't remember a second of it. It's just the first show I remember at all. Story 21. Romper Room, the Canadian version with Miss Fran Papert. I also have early memories of us watching Cheers. Story 22. Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. A strange animated version of Grimm's fairy tales, but told in the most boring way possible. yet I loved it as a child. Story 23, Romper Room, Land of the Lost, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, Wacky Races, Wayback Machine Sherman and Mr. Peabody, The Pink Panther, Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse, all the Hanna-Barbera content. Story 24, a cartoon called Mr. Bogus. I was maybe 5 or 6, so early 90s. He was a small yellow bipedal creature that lived in someone's house, like in the walls or something, maybe near the kitchen. He would come out when the people were away and get chased by the cat or get into some predicament where he was trying to get something off the counter, making messes and causing havoc in the house. He would always find some random new household item, and it would become part of the plot. He talked, but his speech was very lispy and clumsy sounding, and he would refer to himself in the third person. We would watch it in my mom's room on Saturday mornings with her, so she could stay in bed and sleep in after we got up but still keep us entertained. Anyway, the things you remember. Story 25, impossible to say. I remember a bunch of shows I saw at a very young age but have no idea which came first. I suspect most people answering the question would not be certain of the answer either. Just for fun, I will say naughty. Story 26. Not even watched. It was a show none of you has likely heard of called Wallace and Company, I think. It was one of many 1960s local television kid shows around the country at the time. This one was in Tempe, Arizona in 1968 or so. Kids were guests on the show and received prizes. It was my sister's birthday, so she was on the show. I wandered backstage at the studio and got into trouble with the staff. Story 27. Blue's Clues. I still remember my grandmother snapping her fingers to the end credits whenever she babysat me. Story 28. The Incredible Hulk. I wasn't always allowed to watch it because sometimes I would become very angry and throw things around my room. Story 29. Spider-Man on a Saturday morning when I was 2. It was an episode about a walking giant furnace-like robot. Scared me a lot. Story 30. Godzilla, the series. I was about 5 years old then, and I was just thinking, haha, big lizard go stomp stomp. While my older siblings were upset that it was not the actual Godzilla from Japan. Story 31. For me, it was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because I have a memory of being in kindergarten or first grade, and our teacher played VHS videos of it followed by a nice nap time. This memory is very real to me. I have no idea if it is actually real. Story 32. Cartoons include Bugs Bunny and Milton the Monster. The first adult TV show I remember watching and enjoying was Hogan's Heroes. Story 33. Hanna-Barbera cartoons like Huckleberry Hound and Top Cat. Local television kids show personalities. In Seattle, the big names were Captain Puget, Stan Borson, Brakeman Bill, and my favorite, J.P. Patches. Captain Kangaroo was boring. Story 34. It was probably something educational, knowing my parents. I watched a lot of content on Oklahoma Educational Television Authority, which is where Reading Rainbow aired. I have many vague memories, some of which I might have imagined. I'm curious if anyone can verify these shows existed. A cartoon about owls and bats at war, I think. Johnny Quest. I saw commercials for it often, but never a single episode. We Are the Aliens, the butt-ugly aliens. A Scooby-Doo ripoff with a talking car. A dastardly man in a never-ending race with a princess or something. I am 27 years old, if that helps with the time period. Story 35. Possibly Play School. This was the precursor to the Play Bus and later Playdays, which was the Play Bus under a different name. Story 36. Gillian's Island, M******H, Matlock, Walker, Texas Ranger, Mama's Family, Alf, Family Ties, The Cosby Show, Schoolhouse Rock, and so on. Just a regular sick day or late night. Story 37. SpongeBob SquarePants. Or as he is known in Russia, Gubka Bob Kvadratny Shtanu. I started watching the Russian dub as an adult mainly because it is a small way for me to learn Russian. My husband and I are big SpongeBob fans. He became familiar with it because of the Russian dub and has a massive SpongeBob collection. I had a crush on SpongeBob when I was younger. The crush has died down, but my husband adores me calling Gubka Bob to help calm him down. The nickname has a bit of an embarrassing backstory that I prefer not to share now. Story 38. Giant space amoeba attacks Captain James T. Kirk and the Starship Enterprise. I was a big fan of Adam West's Batman television show. Story 39. Probably either Barney or Sesame Street. But I loved watching Saturday Night Nickelodeon. All of the Saturday Night Nickelodeon shows were awesome. Story 40. Star Trek. The Next Generation. We did not have a television anywhere other than my father's room when I was very young. I would watch Star Trek episodes with him sometimes, and we would play Star Trek in the front seat of the car when he drove me places. It was a bench seat of an old pickup truck where I pretended to be Dr. Crusher, and he let me help him move the stick shift. Story 41. Bosco is a television show. Story 42. The Mickey Mouse Club. Also, on Fridays, there was a cartoon show that alternated every other week between Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear. Story 43. Just two good old boys. Would not change if they could. Fighting the system like a true modern-day Robin Hood. Yeehaw. Story 44. Grandma babysat a lot, so I remember Matlock and the soap operas Young and the Restless and Days of Our Lives. And of course, The Price is Right. Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Join In, Today's Special, Zoobly Zoo, and of Green Gables and more. Anything on PBS and CBC. I didn't have cable for a while. We had channels 3, 10, and 13. I watched a lot of movies too. Story 45. Linus Pa Lindgren, an Italian cartoon broadcast in Swedish as Linus Pa Lindgren. Story 46. I think it was Teletubbies, and I had nightmares after a single episode because I believed these characters would come after me. Story 47. UFO Season 1 Episode 19. Ordeal. Specifically, the scene where a member of the Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization is kidnapped by aliens who place a helmet on his head that fills with green fluid. I remember it appearing as black fluid because we had a black and white television. The episode aired just over a week before my 3rd birthday. There are other shows I recall watching before I was 5, such as Funky Phantom, Help, It's the Hair Bear Bunch, Mary, Mungo, and Midge, but this is the only one where the episode can be identified with certainty. The closest other is the Doctor Who serial, The Green Death, but I was 5 by then and cannot pinpoint the specific episode. Story 48. Well, I have very early memories of Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, The Dukes of Hazzard, Sesame Street, Wheel of Fortune, The Price is Right, and Woody Woodpecker. I have no idea which of these memories is first. It is all a jumble of early memories. Story 49, The Saddle Club as a kid. The first television show I watched when I got my first television at 16 was The Bill. I wish there was a way to watch The Bill in Australia now. Story 50, Battle of the Planets. I remember having a conversation about this show in preschool, and then a kid in cowboy boots kicked me. That was just what he did. Every day, this kid would wear his cowboy boots and kick somebody. Kids can be difficult. Story 51. No joke. The Star Wars Holiday Special. I was 4 years old. Of course, I'm sure I had watched public broadcasting service shows like Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers before, but this is absolutely the first show I remember watching. I only knew about Star Wars through osmosis, but I was so excited. I made a fort out of chairs and pillows, and my 4-year-old self loved watching that strange piece of insanity. Story 52. I would also have to say Sesame Street. But strangely enough, even though I was very young, I actually remember watching the first moon landing live on television as well. It was not a television show, of course, but a broadcast. Story 53. I was probably around 4 when I became completely obsessed with Blue's Clues. My mother would find me talking to the television, genuinely trying to help Steve solve the puzzles. Story 54. United Kingdom. The first show I recall seeing was The Tomorrow People, 1973, and those opening titles scared me very much. Story 55. I would say Barney or Mr. Rogers. It is still a joke in my family that the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood theme song is one of the oldest songs I can recite from memory. Story 56. Remember being the keyword for me. There was Captain Kangaroo. The primary actor was Australian, but as I think of old TV shows, I now realize that it was probably the same actor in another show where 2 guys are stuck on a silly alien planet. The premise was that they were not astronauts. They were maintenance workers stocking the rocket. Naturally, after stocking breakfast and dinner, one guy says lunch and the other responds launch. It was a children's show, but the straight man of the pair was probably the same actor who played Captain Kangaroo. Now that I am researching it, I see that the show had a multi-ethnic cast, which means they always included at least one black person living life and being friends with everyone else. In hindsight, I can see how things like that helped shape my worldview. As an adult in my 50s living in the Pacific Northwest, I have a hard time comprehending people in other parts of the United States, on both sides of racial issues, who do not want to be reasonably upstanding citizens and get along with everyone in a way that allows us to forget ethnicity and live life together. Story 57. An old-school Canadian television show, Martin Mystery, got me into horror eventually. A peak show I would 100% recommend. Story 58. I watched Romper Room because my mother was the host of the show. It was filmed across Canada in at least 3 or 4 cities, probably more. It was shot live. At the time, there was no reasonable way to move live video from one location to another. They would insert pre-recorded segments from Toronto, I think. I had to substitute for a sick child once, so I was on the show. I would have only been about 5, so that would be roughly 1965. The next one I remember would be the arena in January 1967, where Kirk fights a Gorn. I memorized the ingredients for gunpowder and had much fun later that year making my first pipe bomb. My most special early TV memory was August 1967. My grandmother invited me to watch the final episode of The Fugitive on her 9-inch black and white television. The television was a couple of feet long with a tiny little screen. It got so hot she kept her tea kettle on top of it to stay warm. I probably took a few radiation doses from that thing. I remember clearly when the lieutenant, wounded, handed his gun to Kimball and sent him after the one-armed man. Grandma gave me some tea. She died not long after. It's a special, cherished memory. The moon landing in July 1969 also stands out. We were at the cottage and my parents woke us up to watch. Story 59. I know that I watched Howdy Doody since I used to have a Howdy Doody figure. I cannot say that I remember the show itself, though. Romper Room, possibly. Captain Kangaroo, I am sure of. Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. Then there was a local television show, Officer Dawn, on an Atlanta station. Story 60. My stepdad would watch Gunsmoke and Bat Masterson. My mom liked the Red Skelton show, so I would see those. I liked the Flintstones, Fraser Thomas's Family Classics on Sundays, Captain Kangaroo, and Garfield Goose and Friends. Romper Room was on back then, but I didn't like it. Story 61. General Hospital. Our house was too close to the mountains for the antenna to receive anything except the American Broadcasting Company. I did not watch much television until we moved and got cable. Story 62. Between Dynasty or Remington Steele, I am not from the United States, so the timeline probably did not match their original release dates. Story 63. My earliest memory is of a show that was on in the early 1970s, around 1972, called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. Story 64. I know it was Sesame Street, but I cannot visualize any memories of it. What I do remember is watching Saturday Morning World Wrestling Federation with my grandfather. Story 65. Roly Poly Oly. Now as an adult, it is such a trippy show, but I distinctly remember it being the first thing I watched. Story 66. Cheers. I was 3. My parents loved that show. I remember the apartment complex we lived in when I was 3 had a bar, and my mom and dad took me to a Christmas party there. I thought we were in Cheers. Story 67. Sesame Street, Barney, Hey Arthur, Power Rangers, Xena, Blue's Clues. These are just a few. There are other cartoons, but I would have to look up their names. Xena is one of the few live-action TV shows I remember from a young age. Story 68. 8 is enough. The youngest son and I resembled one another and were around the same age. I met him at a car show, which was where you got autographs before conventions. His mom was even surprised at how much we looked alike. She asked me to take a photo with him. Story 69. I remember watching a television miniseries version of Alice in Wonderland on Disney. It was already a long watch, and my young brain did not understand that when I turned on the television the next day and the movie was playing, it did not mean it had been running all night long. I literally thought it was such a long movie that it lasted days. When I saw the credits the next day, I was in disbelief that it was such a long movie that it took all day to run the credits as well. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.